Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hello, this is Kevin L. Jackson presenting Digital Transformers from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining. Today, we're going to be spending some time with Mr. Praveen Rao from IBM Blockchain Analytics. He's a managing director of blockchain analytics and partnerships. But before we start, I want to first thank our sponsor, Digital Names by Total Network Services. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to find us wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe so you don't miss a thing. So now, without any further ado, hello, Praveen. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kevin. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
No, I tell you, we've been working together for quite a while, and it's great to have you here on the show. I know you well, but please, can you introduce yourself and your role at IBM to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Praveen Rao. I'm a managing director, predominantly deal with supply chain solutions for blockchain. And also I'm responsible for convening the ecosystems around our blockchain solutions and putting together all the partnerships around the solutions that we have.
Wow, that sounds like a huge role. How did you get that? I mean, when you were in elementary school, would you say, well, one day I'm going to be running blockchain for IBM? What's a bit of your background?
I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Like us all.
That's what you're asking. Yeah, but my background has always been in the technology space, and I consider myself having grown up in the supply chain space as well. So I came from engineering background and then into the business background. So naturally, I gravitate towards harder problems, that involve supply chain, manufacturing, essentially the procurement side of it as well. So I've always played throughout my career in the space where the technology and business kind of meet together. Because as you know, so the technology is a great tool to solve business, and it all boils down to how much value we can generate per person by leveraging technology in some of the things that we have done, like from the business perspective, because supply chain is not new. It's been there since the inception of humanity, right? But we can do wonderful things by leveraging technology, especially, the cloud, analytics, blockchain, and IoT, things that we could never do before. And what it really means is we are increasing the amount of productivity and the value we can generate per person who is kind of working in this space. So that's kind of how my journey started. I was always involved in large business transformation. I've done numerous global SAP deployment. I have a good grip on many of the end-to-end processes and how it is done in a global setting. Some of the nuances around that, that led me to leverage more and more technology. I was involved in big data and analytics, and now as the blockchain came into play, so that's where I was nominated to kind of help lead and bring some of the newer solutions specifically for supply chain and procurement. That's kind of how my journey started, and I've been kind of leading a solution called Trust Your Supplier from its inception, which you guys are also part of the ecosystem. Very happy to have you guys part of that ecosystem as well.
Oh yeah, Source Connect is really proud to be part of TYS. But before we go to that, you mentioned blockchain and how it's important to supply chain. But most people, if you say blockchain, the only thing they can think of is Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin. So it's why is blockchain so hot outside of Bitcoin?
Yeah, blockchain is, it's very interesting question. It's one of the unique technology where a use case became more popular than the technology itself, right?
Yeah, that's kind of backwards.
Yeah, Bitcoin is essentially a use case of the blockchain technology, which it went way ahead before, people could figure out, hey, there is more uses to this technology.
It sort of ran away before anybody could catch it, right?
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, certainly IBM is one of the early adopters or innovators of blockchain too. So there's a wonderful history behind that. I won't go into the details of that, but why blockchain matters, right? Blockchain matters for mainly four reasons. One is, it basically saves cost. It removes inefficiencies and it reduces risks and it increases trust. So the four main tenets, what is really helping blockchain, increase the blockchain adoption in the market. The way it does that is essentially, if you think about it, throughout the history, the commerce thrive when there is better trust between parties, right? And when there is better trust, comes with better transparency among the different parties.
So
And that's kind of what,
yeah,
that's kind of what blockchain does, because what you have is you have a shared ledger among multiple parties, right? And that is immutable. So it's almost like it's etched in stone. So even the person who wrote in it, you can't edit it. You can always append to it, right? So that brings the level of trust, saying you always know the history of what happened. Nobody just snuck behind you and changed their story.
Right.
And it's also there is a provenance of chronology. So that means the timeline of when it happened, how it happened, by whom, and all that. And above all, it's also cryptographically sealed. So that means only the people who are concerned or need to be intended would have access to that data. So it also addresses many of the privacy and the data security concerns that exist in business in general. So in general, procurement supply chain is a multi-party conversation, right? So wherever there is a multi-party conversation, there is some amount of trust deficit. And that's kind of where blockchain really helps, because it helps address that trust deficit, thereby fostering better transparency, trust, and better commerce.
Well, you're talking about having this information where people can see, and blockchain is also often referred to as a shared ledger technology. And when you talk to people about putting something on the blockchain, they say, "Well, I don't want to share my information with anybody. I don't want to, I don't want to do that." Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between? I understand there's a lot of different kinds of blockchain, like permissioned blockchain, permissionless blockchain. How do you know that nobody else sees this shared information?
Yeah, it's a great question, because anytime they say shared, the first and foremost thing that pops up in your head is security and privacy, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want anybody accessing my data. So, and you brought up permissioned. That's a very key concept here, right? So that means blockchain, there are two kinds of blockchain networks that you see. One is exclusive or permissioned, another is non-permissioned or open, right? That means anybody can access, like the crypto space. We won't go into that, right? But supply chain procurement, I mostly deal with the permissioned blockchain network. So that means it's like an exclusive group of participants. That's why we use the word ecosystem. So that means you are part of a network. So that means we know who is accessing the information, where, from how, all that, right? So they'd say, think of this as you're part of a Sam's Club or a Costco, right? So that means you get certain privileges being part of that exclusive club,
So
right?
like having a card, right?
Yeah, right. Having a Costco card kind of, I mean, somebody will watch you before you go in, so you can avail, some of the benefits,
So
right?
before you can see the information on the blockchain, you have to be like a verified member. You have to have that
Verified
card.
member is one. Another thing is there is another concept called channels. That means
Okay.
if you and I are part of the blockchain network, you and I can have a channel. So that means it's similar to what we do now, like phone call, right?
Mhm.
It's a connection between you and me. So you share information with me. No, you give me access. I'm accessing it because you gave me that permission, but you
Okay.
haven't given permission to my neighbor. Even though it's
Right.
part of the network, they can't quite access it. And the information is sealed in all states of data, whether it's at rest, transit, consumption, right? So that means there is a level of protection that happens at every state your data is in. So it's not like I can just hack into the back end and then access it, or while you're using it, I can. So it's only intended between the parties that are permissioned, and you have certain rights, and it is protected at all states of data life cycle.
Right. So it sounds like the whoever puts information on this blockchain has complete control over it at all times.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And you complete control in terms of who you want to share this data with as well. Yeah.
So now in today's world, when you talk about technology, you can't get away from cloud computing. Does blockchain have anything to do with cloud?
Yeah, I mean, it has everything to do with cloud too. Cloud is kind of making the blockchain go, accelerate in terms of the adoption, right? Because earlier you used to have servers sitting in a room, and in fact, the interesting thing is the blockchain, the concept, even though the blockchain technology is new, the
Right.
concept is not new. It is well over 20-year-old concept, right? Because if you think about it, earlier days, they used to have different storage servers, and anytime you had licenses for the software, you would do a level of fault tolerance by putting that license on multiple servers so that you can always ping that server and make sure you have access to that license before
Right.
consuming it, right? But it was all sitting in kind of a storage servers. But now with the advent of cloud, you can do a lot more than managing licenses, right? That's the whole procurement, supply chain things, right? Almost all our blockchain solutions are born and built on cloud. Certainly, it leverages many of the cloud technology when it comes to storage, integration, right? Presentation of the blockchain data. And then it also, it allows us to scale in terms of having multiple nodes, because essentially, since it's on cloud, you can have your own node if you so choose to have a shared ledger in your premise per se.
Got
Right?
you.
Yeah.
So I guess cloud computing is sort of foundational to
Yeah, blockchain is built on, you're right. I mean, not that it has to be cloud, but cloud certainly helps accelerate, because it helps you interoperate with other solutions that are on cloud, and also integrate with other data providers and consumers, right? So certainly the scalability, the performance would be much better. So if you adopt blockchain on a cloud.
All right, great, thanks. So, you'd mentioned earlier also about trust your supplier. Earlier this year, we actually had Gary Storr, the general manager of Trust Your Supplier, on the show. I understand that IBM is on the TYS governance board. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so Trust Your Supplier, it's a journey that we have undergone with a partner, Chainyard, that Gary Storr works for. So certainly we have a joint patent for the solution too. So IBM provides the thought leadership and the domain knowledge and the process knowledge when it comes to building the blockchain, and our expertise in bringing blockchain solutions to the market. Chainyard brings in the development expertise and the development resources needed to realize this solution, and they also operate the solution, right? IBM is also a governance board member and also a buyer on the network. So that means we leverage trust your supplier solution in our own procurement to essentially discover, onboard, qualify suppliers, so that we can always continue to improve the supplier pool that we engage with an IBM.
So this is more than just information technology, though, isn't it? Doesn't IBM use blockchain in different industries?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, blockchain is huge. We have a number of blockchain solutions. We have TradeLens, we have Food Trust. Certainly, we talked about Trust Your Supplier, which I focus a lot of my time on. Right. So blockchain is just getting started. And I think IBM has our services group well over 1,000 networks that they're operating, because we also have a blockchain engine called BTS. Right. Basically, that engine can be leveraged to assemble your own network if you are dealing with a specific problem, and if you want to leverage blockchain technology, solve any of the trust related challenges in your own company with your partners and suppliers. By all means, you can leverage that engine and start your own network. So a lot of our clients have done that. And we also have massive industry solutions like our cross-industry solutions like Trust Your Supplier, where there is almost a commingling or a merger of the social media kind of play along with the blockchain play, where essentially suppliers can maintain their data on a digital passport and share with any number of buyers of their choosing, right? So that way suppliers still control their data, but they can to choose who they want to do business with, that the buyers get to choose. They can constantly discover suppliers. That's why it's kind of it's a nice merger of social media and a blockchain play. So I don't.
Oh, wow. That's scary. That can be scary. A social media for supply chain.
Right.
Now, one thing that kind of gets confusing, are there many different blockchains, and are there different technologies? Like, do you get stuck on one blockchain if you select it, or do you build your own blockchain? How does that work? How many are there? Like, how many clouds?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Blockchain is still in its infancy. I see blockchain going the same route as cloud technology, right? Okay. Because earlier there was just one rack space kind of a cloud, and there is large cloud players came in. Certainly IBM have a cloud, and there are other peers or competitors who also operate clouds, right? So similarly, blockchain is also going to evolve, in my opinion, right? Because IBM has a blockchain platform called IBP, IBM Blockchain Platform, which is built on an open source technology called Hyperledger. So Hyperledger provides the blockchain, and IBM is one of the founding and governing partner of the Hyperledger Foundation, right? Which is offshoot of Linux Foundation, by the way, right? And then there is also Ethereum, there is multi-chain, there is Corda, there is a bunch of other blockchain technologies that are out there. And certainly, they're all at different levels of maturity. Right. And some of our major competitors are also planning to bring their own blockchain technology in the future. But as we go into the future, I see more of a hybrid model, just like how you have hybrid cloud now. Hybrid cloud is kind of a norm right now, where a company operates multiple clouds, whether it's IBM cloud along with Azure and AWS, right? but they all work together to solve a harder business problem. I see blockchain going the same way, where there is essentially an interoperability between different network, because ultimately what we are trying to solve is the trust and transparency, and you need to make sure there is proper handshakes happen between different networks and the data can flow for various reasons, right? So various different use cases.
Right. So on this show, did you just coin a new term, hybrid blockchain? Is that what we're going to be talking about all next year?
I mean, it seems a natural evolution as we go in and as more awareness builds up around blockchain. But I think that's an inevitability. So because the world is too big for one company and one player to own, right? And we
Wow,
have
and
way
this is
more.
coming from IBM. The world is too big for one company. Wow, IBM has changed.
That's my personal view, but anyways, I'm not right. But I think there are many interesting problems that I think blockchain can solve, and I know there is world also has an abundance of talent and talented people. They'll always figure something out. But I think looking at the analogs, right, like the past evolution. So I do see that there would be a blockchain is a network of network already, but there would be a hybrid version of that too in the future.
Okay. So sort of getting back to our knitting, I guess, supply chain, blockchain seems to really be focused on addressing a lot of the risk around supply chain and procurement, logistics, distribution. Can you talk a little bit about the different risks and how blockchain helps with managing those risks?
Yeah, I mean, it's the risk is an inevitable part of dealing, when you're engaged in a multi-party conversation, right? All it takes is few bad apples to spoil the entire carton per se, right? So if you talk to any chief procurement officers, risk and compliance are what keeps them awake, right? Because everybody wants, cheaper, faster, better, no doubt. Right.
Right.
And companies, most CEOs goes to their CPOs, whenever they need cost savings. But at the same time, the last thing they want is do a business that would essentially put them out of business, right? Because that's kind of the risks that you're dealing with, considering almost 60 to 70% of your revenue comes through the product and services that you purchase, transform, and then market, right?
Right.
So it's even more prevalent when it comes to procurement, right? Because you're dealing with different players in different industries, different geographies. Many of them you're doing business for the first time, right? So that's why if you look at the supplier lifecycle management, you start with discovery and then you go into qualification and then onboarding. There are a number of different risks you deal with, right? Both from the operations and also from the onboarding, like the inception of the suppliers into it. So the way we, some of the leading companies, including IBM, solving is through essentially a network, right? I mean, this is a concept that existed from the beginning. So if I know you and if you recommend somebody and if you have worked with two other people said, hey, this person is good, then my risk level goes up because there is 10 people vouching for this person that I'm, that I'm trying to do business with, because there's a, track record of excellence. So you can reasonably predict the future is going to be consistent with that track record, right?
Like people do business with people they know, right?
Yeah, so that is one aspect blockchain brings into the network, because you're part of an exclusive community. So people know each other, they give feedbacks about each other. There's a 360-degree view of the suppliers or the new business you engage with. And then there is also a huge number of partners that we engage with, the data providers, right? If you're dealing with, let's say, a financial viability, there are people like Rapid Rating who will give you FHR score, financial health rating, compared to the peers in the industry. So that would give you an indication of how likely that I can continue to do business with or sustainability, right? We have people like EcoVadis who gives you the sustainability rating. So essentially what we do is in a blockchain, it's all provided directly into the blockchain. So what many of IBM and many of our peers do is essentially we look at the supplier data in the context of the data from the trust anchors per se, right? So all these data providers, so that way you have one consolidated view of various risks, and then you can essentially action on it, whether you want to onboard them or not. And we also have other providers to deal with resiliency and operational risk. For example, a COVID-like situation happened, right? Or like the Fukushima that happened in Japan, right?
Right.
So the first thing that comes to any CPO's mind is, what does it mean? The cases in India were raising like last 2 weeks ago.
Right.
What does it mean to my supply chain? How much of an impact? When China was locked down, people were there were no toilet papers in the thing, right? I mean, similarly, right, for businesses, you have much bigger issues to deal with. What kind of impact you would have on your promises to your clients, right? We have partners like Resilink who can put your entire supply chain on a world map and then kind of show you the suppliers who would be impacted in that particular scenario. Also help you figure out an alternate route, because the last thing you want to do is single source everything to one place and then be, essentially, have a bottleneck in your supply chain. So those are the views that you would get along with, the trust from the trusted partners.
You say, supply chain. If you're talking about supply chain, there's a problem, right? Supposed to be quiet. So I know we're running out of time here, but one thing I did want to sort of understand more is, last year, a lot of people were talking about smart contracting and how smart contracting was going to revolutionize and change supply chain. But now we're talking about blockchain. Aren't they sort of similar?
Yeah, I mean, it's glad you brought it up, because that's another salient features of blockchain, right? It comes out of the box, free of cost to you, right? So what it really means is think about the different things, the cool things that you can do, right? Because right now, that's one beauty of blockchain. It can completely disrupt your current business model. Right now, a supplier does the work and gets paid, right? There's a availability to promise date, and that's the date they should do. It also kind of brings in a level of complacency, both in supplier and the buyer as well. So what blockchain can do is incentivize by having innovative contracts. So what if you can bring product to market faster than your competition by working with your supplier? So it means more to you. You get like much better market penetration or gains, right? So you can structure that, all those scenarios, into your supplier contract. Either you can reward them for delivering early or penalize them for bringing you down or delaying your
right.
So those things are all something you can build it right into their contract and track them throughout their supplier lifecycle, contracts.
Sounds like you're gamifying the supply chain. Is that really what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of things that you could do now, it's mind-boggling, and things that you could never do before. And the best part is it's all transparent. There is no, I mean, we're also reducing the conflict and need for excess audit. I don't know if I read the article somewhere. It said in US alone, we spend about $600 billion in all the internal audits and auditing the systems that we do. So in blockchain, everything is audited every single second. So you don't really need to spend, you can use that time, that money for something more higher value added for your company.
So you mean I don't have to pay for auditors anymore? Hooray!
At least not the internal auditors.
All right. Wow. You've taught me so much in the few minutes we've had. So we're coming to the end of our time, but how could my audience actually reach out to you if they want more?
Absolutely. So I'm available on LinkedIn, Twitter. Certainly, please do connect with me. Also you can send me an email at raopr, my last name, RAOPR at us.ibm.com. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to engage with you.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Praveen, for spending the time with us. And on that note, be sure to check out a wide variety of industry thought leadership at supplychainnow.com. You can find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, this is Kevin L. Jackson, wishing all of our listeners a bright and transformational future. We'll see you next time on Digital Transformers. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me on.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.